Hello, second grade Smarties, and welcome to Wit and Wisdom Module 3 Civil Rights Heroes, lesson number 12. Today, our content question or our pizza bite question that we're trying to answer today is, how does I Have a Dream build my knowledge of what a just world might look like? So, we have talked about Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. Yesterday, we talked about repetition, repeated words, and how it helps a listener understand the meaning or the lesson to learn from a speech. And Dr. King used repeated words such as faith, hope, dream, freedom in his speech because those were important words that he wanted listeners to understand and have a hope for a free nation for all people. So, what I want you to do right now is I want you to sit back and we are going to listen to a poem by Langston Hughes. And on the screen, this is a picture of Langston Hughes. He was a very important figure during the civil rights movement. Our poem is called Words Like Freedom. There are words like freedom, sweet and wonderful to say. On my heartstrings, freedom sings all day, every day. There are words like liberty that almost make me cry. If you had known what I know, you would know why. I'm going to read that again. And after I finish reading it, in the ed puzzle, I want you to tell me, what are some words that you hear in this poem that you have heard in Dr. King's speech? Okay. Words like freedom. There are words like freedom, sweet and wonderful to say. On my heartstrings, freedom sings all day, every day. There are words like liberty that almost make me cry. If you had known what I know, you would know why. What is a word or more than one word that we have heard before when listening to Dr. King's speech? Tell me in the ed puzzle. So, a word that we have heard repeated with talking about Dr. King's speech and his impact on the civil rights movement is freedom. We have heard that phrase, let freedom ring, over and over again while studying the book, I Have a Dream, in Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington. Dr. King's dream was that there would be freedom for all people, regardless of the color of their skin. So, our pizza bite question is, how does I Have a Dream build our knowledge on the idea of a just world? What do you think the word just means? If I live in a just world, what do you think that means? Tell me in the ed puzzle. So when I think of the word just, I think of the word justice. We've talked about justice. Justice is getting what you deserve, right? We are entitled, we deserve equality. We deserve food to keep our stomachs full. We deserve clean water in a place to live. Justice is getting the things that you deserve or are entitled to. Dr. King was fighting against injustice, right? The things that people were not getting that they deserved. So people during the civil rights movement, people of color, were facing injustice. They did not get equal treatment like they deserved. So what do you think it would be like to live in a world that is full of justice, a just world? What would a just world look like? Tell me in the ed puzzle. So a just world would be a place where everyone is treated equally. Everyone has the same opportunities and the same treatment, right? Dr. King his dream was for a just world for all people, regardless of the color of their skin. And yesterday, we talked about the lesson that we can keep in our hearts and our minds, that everyone should be treated equally. Everyone should and deserves equality. So what we're going to do now, we are going to use our two texts to think about the important points or the main topic of Dr. King's speech. So the first text that we read was Martin Luther King and the March on Washington. The second text that we have read is I Have a Dream. Both of these texts talk about Dr. King and his dream for America, but each text gives us different information about the same topic. So I am going to read you excerpts. Excerpts are little chunks of text that we can read instead of reading the whole text over again. So I am going to read some excerpts or chunks from the text, I Have a Dream. And I want you to think, what are the main points that we can take from these chunks? All right, here's the first. The sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together. Little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls. Everyone will be able to work together, pray together, struggle together, go to jail together, stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. Okay, so those were three excerpts or chunks from I Have a Dream, from Dr. King's speech. What is the main topic of those three excerpts? What did we learn that was the same from all three of those excerpts? Tell me in the puzzle. So we learn in those excerpts that Dr. King's dream was that everyone would be together, that everyone would work together, be able to join hands and sit together, that Black and white people could be together. That is the main point that we can learn from Dr. King's speech. His dream for the nation, for the world, was that everyone would be together in equality. So let's look at our main topic from our first text, the March on Washington. Okay, as I am reading these excerpts, these chunks from this text, I want you to think, what is the main topic that we can learn from these sentences? Okay, so in the first chunks that we read, we learned about Dr. King's dream, his dream for the nation. I want you to think about what this information gives us. Okay, are you ready? All right, open your ears and listen closely for that main topic. There has been no slavery for a long time, but are Black people and white people treated equally? No. In the South and in some other states, there are laws to keep Black people and white people apart. Black people cannot eat in many restaurants or stay in many hotels. In movie theaters, they must enter by separate doors and sit way up in the balcony. On public buses, they have to take seats in the back. There are signs that say for whites only. Okay, we're going to pause for a second. Who were all of those quotes about? Who is that all about? It was about the Black community, right? It was about people of color. What did we learn about Black people in these chunks from the text? What did we learn about what was happening during this time? Tell me in the puzzle. So all of these excerpts from the text gives us information and evidence about the injustices, the inequality that Black people faced. And remember, we talked about how all of these injustices led to Dr. King giving his speech about his dream for freedom and equality. So these two texts, they talk about the same person, but and they talk about the same speech, but both texts give us different information to help us understand the meaning of Dr. King's speech and the meaning of the civil rights movement. Isn't that amazing? So when we are writing a paragraph or we are responding to a question, it is so important that we use different sources to help us have a better understanding of what we are trying to tell our reader. So these authors use different information about the same topic to give us a better understanding about the civil rights movement, about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and about his dream speech, about his dream for the world. So, we have spent a lot of time learning about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the March on Washington, and his I Have a Dream speech. I want you to think about some questions that I'm about to give you, and I'm going to give you a chance to pause and then respond in the Ed puzzle. The first question I have for you is, what did both texts teach you about Dr. King and his speech? What did both of those texts teach you about Dr. King? Tell me in the Ed puzzle. So something that I know about Dr. King is that he responded to injustice with his words. He encouraged people to fight injustice and to fight for equality and freedom for all. All right, next question. Why was it useful? Why was it important to read 2 books about Dr. King's speech? Why was it important for us to read 2 books about Dr. King's speech? Tell me in the puzzle. So it was important for us to read 2 books about Dr. King's speech because it gave us different information to help build our knowledge about the topic of the civil rights movement. We were able to use different information about the same topic to keep lessons and information in our hearts, in our minds that we can use in the future. And my last question for you, why is it important to use repetition in a speech? So remember, repetition means to repeat words. Why is repetition important in a speech? Tell me in the puzzle. So the importance of using repetition is so that the listener can hear those words over and over again and know that those words school started. So the listener can know how important those words are. If I say something over and over again to you, like the words keep a growth mindset, you know that those are important words. Those are words that are important to me that I want you to know and use. So when people give speeches or YouTube videos or in movies and you hear words over and over again, that usually means those words are important and they're going to stick in your brain. All right, and speaking of things sticking in our brains about our 2 texts, remember yesterday we talked about how we are using the text I Have a Dream to give us our topic statement about Dr. King's dream for the world and to give us evidence about his dream for children and his dream for the nation. We're using our first text, Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington, to help us with our introduction sentence and our conclusion sentence. Remember, our introduction is our first sentence and our conclusion is our last sentence. Our introduction helps the reader understand what is the main topic about this writing. Why am I reading this? What is this all about? And the conclusion restates what we learned in the introduction and the topic statement. So I want you to think, we are going to make an introduction statement, and we are going to use this introduction statement in our writing that we will be doing tomorrow. So for your introduction statement, we want to answer the question, who was Martin Luther King Jr.? So I am going to write an example sentence right here. And I want you to start thinking right now, who was Martin Luther King Jr.? Who was he? So I am going to start with writing his name. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was what did we learn about Dr. King? What was his job? What did he do for a living? Let me get a book that we have seen before to help us answer this question. Page 32 in the text says, the man's name is Martin Luther King Jr. He is a preacher and the son of a preacher. Ooh, so what was Dr. King? Dr. King was a preacher. Vowel team EA was a preacher who, what did he do? Gave a speech. Where did he give a speech? What was that? What was that important event called? He gave a speech at the, let's see. There are threats against his life. Some people want him dead, but that does not stop him. Today in Washington, Dr. King speaks words of hope. His speech is about his dream for a better world. So where did he give his I Have a Dream speech? It's in the title of our book. At the March on Washington. All right, so in the Ed puzzle, I want you to write an introduction statement for our paragraph there that we are going to write. Go ahead and write your introduction statement, and then we'll make a conclusion. All right, so that introduction statement tells us about who Dr. King is and what he was doing. Our topic statement is going to be Dr. King's speech was about his dream for freedom and equality for the world. Then we have our evidence about his dream for children and his dream for the nation. Now we need our conclusion statement. What impact did Martin Luther King's Jr. speech have? Reread pages 41 through 47. All right, so I'm going to go back. Now, Dr. King gave his speech. How did his speech change America? Think back to the text. I'm going to read the last few pages of the text. When Dr. King finishes, there is silence. Then 250,000 people start to clap and to cheer. Some people are so moved by his words, they cry. People all around the world watch Martin Luther King Jr. on TV. So does President John F. Kennedy. By early evening, people start back to their cars, to the buses, into the trains and planes. It is time to go home. The march has ended. But that is not the end of the story. 1 year later, a law is passed. It is called the Civil Rights Act of 1964. From now on, there cannot be restaurants for whites only. There cannot be separate seating for Black people and white people in any public place. People cannot be kept apart just because of the color of their skin. So what happened after Dr. King gave his speech? What happened a year after Dr. King gave his speech? What was passed? Let's go back to that last page. 1 year later, a law is passed. It is called the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So what impact did he have? What was passed? The Civil Rights Act. So I'm going to make sure I spell those words correctly, and it's a proper noun. So the first letter of each word is going to be capitalized. The Civil Rights Movement of 1964. What did it do? Made it. Let's go back. Let's see. People cannot be kept apart just because of their skin color. Ooh, so we know segregation is the act of keeping people apart. What was the opposite of that? Integration. The civil rights movement of 1964 made integration come to America. So it made integration important to America. It forced America to become integrated so that people could not be separated by the color of their skin. So tomorrow, we are going to be putting this all together to answer the question, what was Dr. King's dream for the world? All right, Smarties, and we are going to go back into present mode, and we're going to finish up with a deep dive. So we are going to be creating a Frayer model. Say Frayer for me. Frayer model. So we are going to be creating a Frayer model for the word freedom. But let's think about the meaning of the word freedom. Freedom is the ability to act and speak as one wants. So I have the ability to act and speak without judgment, right? I have the freedom to act and do what I want to do. Liberty is the right to act as one chooses. I have the liberty to go and do what I want. So, I'm going to give you a couple questions using these words. You're either going to answer yes or no in the ed puzzle. Are you ready? If you have the liberty to check out any book in the shelf, can you choose any book on the shelf? If you have the liberty, the right to do what you want, to check out any book in the library, can you choose any book on the shelf? In the ed puzzle, I want you to tell me yes or no. Yes, right? If I have the liberty, the right to do and choose what I want to do, I can choose whatever book I want in the library. All right, what about using the word freedom? If you have to sit with your class at lunch, do you have the freedom to sit wherever you want in the cafeteria? All right, listen to that again. Think about the meaning of freedom and think if this answer is going to be yes or no. If you have to sit with your class at lunch, do you have the freedom to sit wherever you want in the cafeteria? Yes or no? No. If you have to, if you are forced to sit with your class, you do not get to do what you want to do, right? If it is a rule that you have to sit with your class at lunch, you do not have the freedom to go sit where you want to because that is going against the rules, the expectations from your teacher. All right, so we talked about making a Frayer model. Remember, we have seen a Frayer model before, right? So we have a vocabulary word. We have the definition, the ability to act and speak as one wants. What are some characteristics or facts that we know about freedom? What are some things that we know about the word freedom? So, for example, Dr. King talked about freedom for Black people in America. He fought for freedom for all people. That is a fact about freedom. Freedom also means that you can do and be where everyone else is. That is another example or characteristic of freedom. In the puzzle, I want you to tell me what is an example of freedom that we have learned about with Dr. King and his speech. What is an example of freedom? Tell me in the puzzle. So an example of freedom would be integration, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Another example of freedom would be water fountains for everyone restaurants for everyone, movie theaters for everyone. What about non-examples? What are examples that do not mean freedom? Tell me in the puzzle. So some examples would be places that were whites only. That is not an example of freedom. Another example would be segregation, the act of keeping people apart on the color of their skin. That is not freedom. And Jim Crow laws. Remember, Jim Crow laws are those laws that kept Black and white people apart. So we can use Frayer models, we can use charts and graphs to help us understand the meanings of words. So we can make sure to use vocabulary words correctly in our writing. All right, Smarties, that is it for today's lesson. Remember to keep that growth mindset. Good learners do hard things. And remember to fight against injustices. Freedom is for everyone. Happy learning, Smarties.